Fallout =RK Part 3 Senate Chamber, Senate Building, Coruscant. Palpatine was making one of his best performances in his decades-long political career. He knew that the consequences of condemning Atrizia were going to be severe, however the circus he was the center of was getting ridiculous. Most of the senators who saw things his way, those he had bought or blackmailed to support him, stood strong. The Corellians and their allies were supportive, and for once Organa was proving useful instead of another headache. The same couldn't be said for too many of the remaining senators. There was a significant block of new faces Palpatine was unable to influence directly yet, and most of them were horrified by the Gar burning down a core world. Others, led by Sylvaris and her clique, seized the opportunity to attack Hims and Vale. This time the Cathar woman was supported by incested Mothma, who radiated fury. The only bright spot was the cracks forming in the alliance between Naboo, Chandrila, Alderaan and their little cliques. Palpatine was pretty sure that Mothma was feeling betrayed after both Organa and Amidala appeared to be at least neutral if not in open support of the Chancellor's decision. Then there were all other opportunists making the mess for all it was worth. Palpatine was sure that some of them would be approaching him to cut deals in exchange of publicly supporting his decisions about Crimson. After suffering yet another string of accusations from Sylvaris, the Chancellor was beginning to lose his patience. It's been 5 hours that he had to fend off half the Senate, and he felt like frying someone to relieve some stress. That Cathar nuisance would do nicely. I could have acted differently, that much is true. Palpatine spoke coldly. For once he was unable to keep his kind old man mask firmly in place, and some of the Durasteel bellow showed in his voice. I could have told the Senate that Crimson might still exist. We could have debated for weeks. Created committees to study the possible danger. Called experts to advise us on the best course of action. The Chancellor glared at Sylvaris. Honestly, I disregarded that idea immediately. While this Senate is bastion of democracy, of freedom, it's anything but fast in its decision-making. I experienced that firsthand during the Naboo crisis before you voted me in to hold this prestigious position. What was it? Not enough evidence? A committee needed to be created to examine the situation? Palpatine sneered. The Sith Lord paused and took a deep breath. All his frustration and anger were bleeding through his mask, and that was unacceptable. Alienating a large portion of the Senate would make his life much more difficult. I'm nearing the end of my second term as Chancellor, Palpatine continued to speak more calmly. He chose not to acknowledge the shouts of support and derision coming from the senators. I've experienced the Senate at both its best and worst. Our efficiency leaves a lot to be desired when we deal with a comparatively small crisis. Frankly, when we have a hard decision with far-reaching consequences to make, we can and more often than not are bogged down for months or years. The noise level increased. Palpatine put a serene smile on his face and continued as if nothing was happening. What happened on Atrizia was a situation without precedent. There was no time to properly discuss matters. No enemy to negotiate with. Crimson was no conventional foe that could be halted or routed. Any attempted evacuation would risk spreading the sickness to other worlds. If handled carefully, if we were in ordinary lucky, we could have saved some small fraction of the Atrizians. However, that was a risk I couldn't justify. I still can't. Attempting such a humanitarian act would have risked the whole galaxy. After just 12 hours, Crimson was powerful enough to cripple a whole fleet. After a day? We couldn't have contained it, Palpatine sighed sadly. His face became a picture of pained regret. As a Chancellor, my duty is to protect the whole Republic. To always place the needs of the many in front of the needs of the few. I regret this terrible loss of life. Atrizia will be a part of my nightmares until my dying day. It was true even. Sidious shuddered to think how a damned sickness came so close to undoing all his work and ambitions. There was no other acceptable choice. The only way to be sure that Crimson was eradicated was to purge Atrizia from orbit. I will never have good night's sleep again after consigning 32 billions of my own people to death. Palpatine looked at the senators through haunted eyes. The memory of Atrizia is my burden to carry. Finally Palpatine could hold back no longer and showed a trace of the fury he felt at everything that happened lately. What Senator Sylvaris chooses to forget is that if I hadn't made that call when I was asked to do my duty as a Chancellor, by now trillions all over the core could be dying and the rest of the galaxy would have followed. Palpatine lowered his head and took a deep breath. He utilized various meditation techniques to restore his control over his temper. What he just said was going to help in some circles, however he was sure it had alienated some senators from supporting him anytime soon. The Chancellor raised his head and showed himself as an old man haunted by his regrettable actions, yet still ready to discharge his duty. Mothma was going to be his next inquisitor. Her pod came to rest next to his own and her blazing eyes bored into his own. That was a good speech, Chancellor. Still, you didn't answer some important questions. Why was there no warning of a ship carrying deadly bioweapon? I'm sure that any planetary defense force would have taken it seriously after Naboo. There was no warning sent to the public at large that a GAR unit you sent to a bioweapon warfare facility was out of contact and you suspected they were coming back infected. You might have had no choice after Atrizia was exposed to that horror. I'm sure we'll be debating that for a long time. Answer my questions, Chancellor. Palpatine gazed back at the woman and ruthlessly crushed his flaring rage. Becoming Emperor would be worth it just so he wouldn't deal with the cripping Senate and people like Mothma as often. There was a warning sent to all GAR units as well as the governments in the sectors which if it existed Crimson could reach. I should remind you, Senator, that until an expert saw footage from Atrizia, no one knew if the bloody thing still existed. We all hoped that the unit sent to that facility had fallen prey to either pirates, separatists or a more conventional bioweapon. I was not going to cause a widespread panic out of fear when there could have been no threat. Frankly, gathering the containment fleet and putting General Vale in charge was more than I could possibly justify when we should have been preparing for the separatist offensive. Unfortunately our fears weren't unfounded and by the time we knew the truth it was too late. Crimson had a free reign for long enough and Atrizia was doomed before General Vale could arrive and give us a confirmation that the plague was not only there but out of control. Somehow Mothma's glare intensified. With that look on her face and such fury emanating from her, the senator did a passable rendition of a Sith. Mothma opened her mouth and began questioning him anew. Palpatine sighed and prepared to face the next round of the Inquisition. =RK=, Master Teen's quarters. Jedi Temple, Coruscant. 4 Jedi Masters stood around a small table and watched an interview by a woman they believed to be a Sith Lord of old. All of them had researched Vale's past, knew of his 2 masters, Barras and Zash. Knew that the woman had achieved functional immortality a few centuries before the Great War. We should have expected something like this. Piel groaned. A master and an apprentice. Teen seethed. We've been deceived. All we knew of the Sith is suspect. All the actions we saw them do, smoke and mirrors. Master Yoda is convinced that Vale has been here for less than a year. Yaddle countered. Even if that's true, what about his master? Ramsisis hissed. We've been played at least as far as Naboo and the Sith Kenobi defeated. Yes. Teen muttered, then frowned. We believed him. However, did he really win against a Sith who murdered his master? What are you saying? That Master Kenobi has been compromised that far back? Piel exclaimed. I don't know. Just a paranoid thought. Teen shrugged. It would explain much, he laughed bitterly. It would also mean we all had been blind for at least that long. I would like to say such a thing is out of the question, yet. Another shrug. Perhaps, however does it matter? Kenobi is lost to us. This Zash woman might very well be the Sith we've been looking for all along. PML interjected. I've hoped that you've been overreacting all along. Yaddle stared at Zash's image. It would appear that I was mistaken. The Sith have obviously changed. Evolved. They still decline to meet us in open combat and are content in distracting us with pawns like Dooku while undermining us. By deciding to reveal herself, this new Sith is showing that we're no longer a major threat. They have to be almost ready to move against us, Ramsisis stated. That's what I'm afraid of. We've run out of time. At best we have until the Separatists' offensive is contained. I doubt that the Sith will wait longer than that. Perhaps they would use the chaos and distraction to strike while we least expect it. Teen must. We need to act soon or all is lost. Piel nodded in agreement. Kota should have Dooku by now. Hopefully he could shed some light on the Sith's plans. Once we have him for sure, I'll talk with the intelligence directors. I feel that at least one of them will be willing to support us if we can offer some evidence. Teen explained. Even then we'll need military support. Ramsisis noted. The presence of so many clones in the temple hasn't slipped my mind. T nodded. They keep us as hostages. Senator Silvares might be inclined to support us. After Atrizia there would be others who are horrified by the casual destruction of a whole world. We can use that. Piel thought aloud. This is madness. Yaddle groaned. It's unfortunate that I don't see a better alternative. Waiting isn't an option. You're with us, then? Teen asked. I won't stand by and watch the Sith take over the galaxy without opposition, no matter the price we would have to pay. However, we need to plan carefully. Move all the younglings and the Jedi not proficient in combat away from Coruscant. Doing so will give us away. Rancisis muttered sadly. Not doing it will doom the Jedi even if we succeed. Yaddle countered. We'll make plans to evacuate them. At worst, the distraction of our actions should allow them to slip away, Piel agreed. Ashe equals. Republic cruiser unflinching. En route to Coruscant. Atrizia changed things. Zash's interview even more. Windu was aware of whom she was supposed to be. While it was possible that the woman was really just a scientist who got lucky, or unlucky, depending on your point of view, the former Jedi Master didn't believe in such an explanation. The Sith had finally revealed their hand and the implications were obvious. Time was running out fast. And there was no longer turning back. Windu looked down at the bodies of his minders. He and Kota had offered the commandos a chance to surrender. The clones tried to send a warning, but unfortunately for them the whole ship was under heavy jamming. The commandos tried to fight but they stood no chance against the pair of Jedi. Windu looked sadly at the corpses. So that's how treason feels like. He expected something more. I'll make sure everyone knows you're all out of contact doing an errand for me. My boys and girls will corroborate our story, Kota said. It might buy us some time. Windu frowned. They were too long out of contact already. Mace nodded at the corpses. It's a race against time then. We'll be at Coruscant in 10 days. I just hope it won't be too late by then. Windu muttered. I need to meditate. To find the path giving us the best possible odds. May the Force be with us all. Kota muttered. RK equals. Part 4. Medbay. Corellian Cruiser Freedom. Atrizia. Hi? I tried. You're still alive. Bo frowned. My dear husband, my wife's words contained enough sarcasm to choke at least half of Coruscant. You left me behind while you went to confront the greatest threat this galaxy has seen in thousands of years. Sorry? I guess I won't be getting laid anytime soon. You'll be making it up to me. That wasn't a request but a statement of fact. I'll think of something. You'd better. Are you all right? Bo's eyes softened a bit. Nothing permanent. I can't say the same for too many of my people. It's been a couple of hours since I regained consciousness and the first thing I did after making myself an alchemical cocktail to help in my recovery was to request a status report. Crimson made a number on us. Half the fleet was going to need some dock time, the command structure was shot to hell and the Republic was going bonkers over what I did couple of days ago. Just peachy. You didn't take any Mandalorians with you. You left us all behind. This was a Sith and Republic mess and the price to clean it up was ours to pay, not Mandalore's. I countered. Bo studied me for a long moment before nodding. I understand. However, some won't agree with your arguments. Can't be helped. I shrugged. When are you coming back? I still need to sort the mess here and make sure Crimson is really gone this time. I'll be sending the damaged ships back to Corellia and go hunt down the Criffing thing between 2 weeks and a month, depending on what happens on my end and what the Separatists do in the meantime. Did you see Zash's interview? Bo asked. Her what? The hell? She wasn't supposed to reveal herself just yet. My wife smirked and explained. Love, I'll call you later. I need to figure out how much more complicated my life just became. I groaned. So you two didn't plan it? Bo inquired. Certainly not, Zash revealing herself this early. I grumbled. She introduced herself as a simple scientist. Any Jedi who saw the records about me would recognize the name. Criffit, this might push the bastards over the edge. We needed them to lay low for the next month or two at least. I need to talk with Palpatine. I'll call you later and find a way to make up to you. Love you, bye. I cut the channel and called Palpy. The Criff were those two thinking? RK equals. Confederate Military HQ. Rakshulon City. Raxus. Sandhill stared at the self-proclaimed Old Republic Jedi in orbit. The man had acted polite enough when requesting to talk with someone in authority on the matters of an alliance against the Republic. Jared Parian was the Jedi's name, and he admitted that his people were the ones responsible for the war escalating. Some of them used to be a part of the Confederacy, before they found out that Dooku was a Sith and began causing trouble. It sounded almost plausible. After all the trouble you've caused us, why would we even consider an alliance instead of blowing you up? Ilroth asked. I'm not asking you to trust me. After Dooku betrayed you all, I'm not expecting that. All I'm asking you is to work beside you to bring the Republic down. Jared spoke quietly. Did you see that interview by Zash on GNN? The Jedi changed the topic. Most people in the galaxy saw it by now, Hill said. That's Vale's master. If I had any doubts that the Republic hasn't become a Sith playground, her presence confirms it. The Jedi took a deep breath. I know you have no reason to believe anything I tell you. All I'm asking you for an opportunity to prove that I'm an enemy to the Republic. Parian smiled. I can offer you an equalizer. You lack Force users. I can offer you a battalion worth of them. While all but a few aren't as well trained as Jedi, they're good enough to tie them up and give your commanders a free rein. I can also offer a regiment of veteran special forces led by a cadre of Old Republic Jedi. We're a force multiplier that can turn the tide of any ground engagement. Given enough time, I can train even more Force adepts to counter the so-called Jedi and eventually suppers them. You'll need my help to handle Vale and his master. Stay put, Master Parian. We'll discuss your proposal. He'll cut the comm. Thoughts? It's a setup, Vombra stated. Even if the Jedi is telling the truth, we can't trust him. Trust? Not necessary. Use him, and if he proves problematic, dispose of him. Admiral Trench said. Keep the man at distance, don't meet with him or his agents. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. At best they will be useful. At worst, they will be where we can reach them instead of working from the shadows. I concur. A battalion of Jedi equivalents? Too good to be true. We need to spring this trap and see what awaits us. Admiral Kirst agreed. I don't trust any Jedi, Sith or other space wizards, Ilroth declared. However, you're right. We need to know more. If they're useful, we'll use them for the time being. If not, see to it that they can't be a problem ever again. The Nemodian ordered. I would prefer to keep this complication as far away from us as possible, but I'll support your position. Hill grumbled. As if the Krithing Sith weren't enough. That man admitted that he and his people had committed treason. Admiral Tonith said. Let's make sure that their end is useful. The so-called Jedi gave us a reason to act against him and his minions when we deem it convenient. So we all concur? Hill asked. A chorus of agreements, some half-hearted, followed. How are we going to use Parian's forces? Hill asked. Under our command on assault ships that can't cause much damage even if taken over. We'll keep them jammed just in case they try to warn the Republic or something, Trench said. I can use such troops on Camino. General Fastar offered. They might be invaluable in taking out the shield generators and retrieving the samples that are our primary objectives. It's decided then? We offer Parian a chance to prove himself. The cyborg grumbled. So be it. Moments later a comm channel was established. You've decided already? The Jedi looked surprised. We aren't the Senate. Hill scoffed. We have a proposition. You'll be placing the forces you offered under our tactical command. We'll give you an opportunity to prove yourself. Acceptable. You won't regret this. Parian smiled. I'm already regretting it, Vombra whispered. All that went through his voice modulator was a quiet hiss. You understand we'll have to take precautions to avoid vital intelligence reaching the Republic? Trench asked. I expected as much. You don't trust me or mine and will use us as shock troops to break the enemy. We've done it before. We'll be fine. The Jedi shrugged. Now let's discuss the details. Interlude, Intelligence Woes 2, = RK = Oni cruiser run to dawn. High orbit above Coruscant. Officially, Director Ula was observing the effectiveness of an upgraded scanner born from the cooperation between Sib and Oni. The real reason why was in space was to meet Fel along with a pair of Jedi and a prisoner who was still supposed to be days away from the capital. The test itself was real and would be commencing in a few minutes. Meanwhile, The two directors, the Jedi and their prisoner, were seated around a small table in a briefing room and listening to Dooku's story. Marek groaned when the former Jedi finished. I would require him to go through a proper interrogation, but I've done my homework. We're likely to get much less out of him than you. How credible is that story? Ula asked. As far as we can tell, it's the truth as he knows it. Kota nodded at the crippled Count. That certainly is a lot to swallow, Fel murmured. The Twi'lek rubbed her forehead and groaned. If this is true, we've all dropped the ball. What do we do now? Marek frowned. From all things to fall into his lap, this armed thermal detonator took the prize. If your concerns are valid, even solid proof won't be enough. Oh, we can use it to back our narrative, but it won't be sufficient to remove Palpatine from power. The best we can hope for is that Vale and that Zash woman are new actors, and there was just one Sith Lord working against us until recently. I know it's unlikely given all the circumstantial evidence, but even that would be bad enough, Yvonne said. We had more time to digest the information and reached similar conclusion. In the end, it's immaterial if Vale told the truth and appeared just a few months ago. He's obviously working closely with the Chancellor, and now we have another Sith who revealed herself. Windu gazed intently at the directors. If the Force is on our side for once, that's all, 3 Sith controlling the Republic. Perhaps more waiting in the shadows. They've successfully discredited you people, though some of you did their work for them. Fel grumbled. When everything goes to hell, we won't have much popular support, we? Marek asked hopefully. I've given an oath to the Republic, to democracy. Granted, there isn't much of the latter, but that might very well be the Sith's influence. Looking at the Chancellor's actions with the expectation that he wants to build an empire, they do look quite sinister, I'll grant you that. Yvonne nodded. I don't think they trust each other. Not at the beginning anyway. Marek voiced his thoughts. Vale was the one who pointed us at possible irregularities at the Chancellor's office and was the one pushing hardest for a massive increase of Palpatine's security. It all looked obvious a few months ago. Ula trailed off. He can't be out playing Sith with so much rotating security around, Fel chuckled. That makes sense. Windu frowned. We might be able to use it. Let's be frank, this is going to be a do or die op, Marek stated. We need to cover our bases and act before the Sith. At best they will wait until the current crisis is handled before moving against the Jedi. Once you're out of the game, removing them from power will be much harder if possible at all. That's our belief. Kota nodded. We're certain that the clones will support Palpatine. He was the one to really commission the army after all. Dooku added his 2 credits. Why is he here still? Fel asked. He's a dead man if his master wins, Windu stated the obvious. I hope you don't intend to use him. Doing so would destroy any support we might gain otherwise. We dismissed the idea because of that, Kota reassured the directors. Just make sure the rest of the Jedi don't jump the gun. I'll talk with Sylvaris and try persuading her to help us, Marek said. We need a plan. Simply walking up to Palpatine and trying to arrest him won't work. Perhaps. Yvonne smirked. I have an idea. =RK=. Senator Sylvaris' residence. Coruscant. It took Marek a few days to sound off some of his most reliable agents, and Kota helped ensure that they were genuine in their desire to protect the Republic at all costs, before he could be reasonably sure that he had somewhat free hand to act. Only being on his side helped too, with a few of Fel's agents running interference. That's how he and Kota ended up talking with the Cathar senator and few of her closest allies. The presence of Mon Mothma of Chandrila was the biggest surprise. That would have concerned Ula if he didn't know why the woman had supported Vale after he became Mandalore. Chandrila was preparing for any eventuality. It remained to be seen how willing they were to act. That's the situation. Kota finished explaining the bind they found themselves in. The senators looked uneasy at each other. That's what I tried to warn you of all along. Sylvaris announced almost gleefully. You did. Mothma conceded. I've had qualms about both Palpatine's and Vale's intentions from the beginning. While at this time I'm not ready to offer open support, the senator raised a hand. I'll lay the groundwork in case we fail. Mothma looked at Kota. You're afraid that the Sith have planned this war for a long time. They have to expect that you will attempt to stop them. Yes. Windu and I believe that they will use our actions as a pretext to destroy the Jedi. That or manufacture one when they're ready, and that has to be soon. They've shown their hand. My personal belief is that Crimson blindsided them, or they would have acted against us already. The Republic is on borrowed time. Kota confirmed. Then you know there's a very real chance you'll fail. Mothma told him. We know. There was a discussion about just leaving, but doing so would mean abandoning the Republic and our duty. Kota took a deep breath. We'll do everything we can to stop the Sith. Good. That does you all a credit. Mothma nodded. However, in case you fail, we need to be prepared. Otherwise the Republic will be lost, and there might be decades if not centuries before it's restored. You plan a rebellion? Marek got it first. I think I can release some agents to aid you in that before we go loud. I'm sure Director Fell can do the same. Any assistance would be appreciated. Mothma nodded. Can you count on your support? Kota looked at the rest of the senators in turn. We won't suffer a resurgent Mandalore or another Sith Empire, Silvaris declared. One after another the remaining senators voiced their agreements. The Jedi nodded. Shortly after they left, 2 of the senators suffered unfortunate accidents. The transport of one malfunctioned and it slammed in the side of a space scrapper. The other stopped to pick up dinner and ended up with a severe infection requiring his hospitalization. The Bith soon fell into coma and never recovered. =RK=. Intelligence Woes 3. =RK=. Sib Safe House. Location classified. Coruscant. The conspirators gathered into the living room of an ordinary apartment in one of the 1,000 space scrapers on Coruscant. No one paid much attention to the sparse old furniture and just sat around the table in the corner of the room farthest from the covered windows. Good news, I hope? Director Fell asked. I've been able to keep a lid on things so far. Master Teen nodded. There shouldn't be any accidents before we're ready. Good. We need to discuss contingencies and what we expect to achieve. Ula began. We, he nodded at his colleague, want real democracy restored to the Republic. Because of our positions, both of us saw exactly how the Senate is run. We take our oaths seriously, and they aren't to an oligarchy in all but name. Our intent is to break the Sith and reform the Republic, Kota reassured the director. That's commendable. Do you really believe you'll be in a position to succeed? Fell asked. The Jedi looked at each other. If the Force is with us, ideally we'll be able to remove the Sith and avert a real civil war, Teen said. Unfortunately, I can't afford to let my mind be clouded by wishful thinking. I made that mistake once the cost was most of the public support and goodwill the Jedi had left. He admitted. Realistically, we have the numbers to take out the Sith, but even with your support the casualties will be significant. We have a battalion in the temple that's practically keeping the younger members of the Order hostages. We plan to extract them and send them into hiding. Masters Yaddle and Dralik will take care of that. We'll appreciate some support in getting them off-world. My people will handle that. I'll have a fast light cruiser and few frigates ready to get them out if everything else fails. Otherwise it would be best if we can smuggle most of them covertly. We'll discuss the details later. Fell offered her help. Thank you, Director. Kota smiled. To be honest, we expect to be hunted down if we succeed. Currently we lack proof that the public and majority of the Senate would accept. If we're lucky we might be able to get such after dealing with the Sith, but by then it would probably be too late. You're aware of the consequences then? Marek noted. Yes. Teen confirmed. The alternatives are worse. We know that Zash's revelation is either arrogance or bait, perhaps both. Our best guess is that Crimson blindsided the Sith, otherwise they would have been ready to act against us by now. Some of us believe that Zash revealed herself to keep Palpatine's public support high after Atrizia and to help cement the image the Sith are selling to the people at large. We concur, Fell said. Grave mistakes were made. The Sith obviously evolved while we stagnated. Teen slowly admitted. There was obvious pain in his voice as he did so. Now we're put in a position where if we act we would likely doom the Order. However, that's the best of a lot of terrible options. If we run, which might not be successful, we would be abandoning the Republic to the Sith. We would be betraying our duty. The Jedi Master sighed. We're running out of time. The Sith already control the Republic and it's just a matter of time before they have transformed it into the Sith Empire reborn. I don't need to explain to you what that would mean to the galaxy at large, do I? We actually paid attention to history in school, Marek said in a dry voice. I know that the two of you want us to wait until the Sith offensive loses steam. I generally agree with that sentiment. It would be for the best if the Separatists don't win the war. While they're the lesser evil compared to the Sith, they're terrible enough. However, by waiting that long, we give time for someone to slip up or for the Sith to strike before us. What are your thoughts on the matter? Kota asked. Torn actually. I agree. The best time to strike in order to succeed will be right in the middle of the offensive when the principal Sith will be distracted. Then there's Yvonne's idea, which while dangerous can make all the difference in the world. Marek admitted. I wish it was easier. That we could use the Force to persuade enough senators to support us, Kota sighed. Leaving the moral consideration aside, that simply won't work on anyone with a stronger mind unless we want to cause brain damage and compromise ourselves that way. I should have built support in the Senate before confronting Vale, Teen said. I was too sure of myself. I was convinced that our long service combined with the support we had left would be enough to sway the Senate. That the senators remember their history, that they knew what resurgent Sith would mean for the galaxy. I was a fool. The path to hell is paved with good intentions. Yvonne muttered. I heard it said years ago and I find it fitting. She shrugged. With the Sith around, there are more than enough bad intentions to doom at least half the galaxy. Kota scoffed. Can't say I disagree, Marek said. What's done is done, Kota declared. Now we need to deal with the consequences. =RK equals. Interlude, How to Slay a Monster. =RK equals. Corellian Cruiser Freedom. Black Site 34. It took 10 days to reconstitute the fleet and get here. I spent a lot of the time in talks with Palpatine and Zash. The Chancellor was actually grateful for the public support, which ensured that he just lost 10% of his approval over Atrizia, which meant that about 60% of the citizenry were more or less backing him up. It was little things like that which explained why he found it so easy and painless to become emperor in the other timeline. While building alliances with senators and planetary governments for decades helped a lot too, I reckon. Still, Zash's shenanigans, while useful, caused some waves. Palpy had Sib keeping a very close eye on the Jedi who were laying low after Atrizia. We all knew it was just a matter of time before they acted out and planned for it, though hopefully they weren't going to criff us up on the eve of the Sith offensive. At least after destroying their image, with Palpy jumping on the opportunity to make it tank even faster than the Jedi could do it by themselves, the Conservatives weren't going to get sufficient support to be a real threat. What we feared was the chaos that would ensue once a hand was forced and Order 66 went into effect. For the time being that was Palpy's problem. He was back on Coruscant and had Zash around as a backup in case the worst happened. Kenobi was there too, along with my wife, my Mandalorians who had starting orders to suppress any coup attempt against Palpy unless it was my own. I had other concerns and spent the days after awakening in recovery and making myself alchemical concoctions to help me get better faster. I also had to deal with a lot of work concerning the running of the fleet. While Joanna was recovering nicely, she was far from 100% and I had to deal with most of her duties too. We were very short-staffed even after taking in most engineers and surviving officers from the crippled ships before sending them to Corellia. Finally we arrived. The fleet exited hyperspace on the edge of the system and began sensor sweeps. A lot of asteroids, a single planetoid, and that's it, sir. Acting Captain Horn announced after consulting with the sensor operator. Take us to the black site and commence bombardment when we're at range. I'll be doing my best to protect us all, though this time it shouldn't be nearly as bad. I certainly hope so. The young officer's face was pale but his voice didn't waver and he began issuing the relevant orders. I let the force flow through me and slowly began spreading my battle meditation among the critical crew. My nerves burned with the strain and it was going to get much worse. By the time we reached orbit, I had the fleet protected as well as I could in my state. Yet I was already sweating from the strain and felt like a Sith Lord was practicing his lighting on me. What was left of Crimson was aware. It knew its doom was approaching and the criffing bug was going crazy. The Force pulsed with its fury and desperation. Its presence was growing as we approached, but fortunately it was a mere pale shadow of what I faced back on Atrizia. Crimson struck as we entered orbit. A hammer slammed in the gestalt I had weaved from the minds of all the officer and engineers in the fleet. I snarled when my mind rang from the strike, yet what I experienced was a mere echo. I had learned my lesson the first time and the attack spread all over the men and women in the web of the battle meditation, causing a mild headache at best. The sickness gave out an impotent scream, then the first salvo struck. It flailed against me again and again. It was like throwing small rocks in a pond. It caused inconvenience, but no real harm. The plague's desperation was like a fine drink. Its impotent fury, something to enjoy. Its fear, oh, that was something I was savoring with relish. The research facility was reinforced. Sturdy. However, without a planetary shield, it stood no chance against the firepower leveled against it. The rock covering it became magma. The facility itself was shaking, buckling from the shocks of the bombardment. Still, it was impressive engineering. It wasn't until the fifth salvo that Crimson felt pain and lost it. I heard it scream through the force, sensed its pain and smiled. More salvos went in. Crimson gave one last shriek that reverberated through the force and was silenced forever. I grabbed a nearby console to steady myself and felt profound relief. Captain, I'm pretty sure that we just got it, but continue the bombardment. I want to be sure that nothing could possibly survive down there. My smile turned into a grin. It's fitting, I think. What, sir? Horn asked. That the criffing thing died with a whimper, unable to kill anyone else. I explained. Damn right, sir. I just wish that the captain, the admiral didn't relapse and cold be here to witness it personally. Horn muttered. At least she's expected to make full recovery. That bloody thing did a number to us all. I began releasing the battle meditation slowly so I wouldn't cause shock to the people I was influencing. Communications, open a channel to Coruscant, they can use the good news. I ordered. It was over. That criffing thing was dead. Right? The Confederacy Strikes Back. =RK=. Part 1. The long-anticipated Confederate offensive began with simultaneous attack all over the galaxy. It was led by over 100 munificent battle groups under the command of unrestrained tactical droids. Their targets were Republic pickets, listening posts and patrolling ships. 6 hours later, the first heavy blows were struck. First, in the north and northeast galactic sectors, Confederate fleets fell upon Yugimina, Borosk, Bandhamd, and Pindar. Separatist units moved to secure the far north with strikes upon Cernpidal and Bimil. At that time the long-feared reduction of the North Pocket began with the fleets moving to secure Uria and Florum. Another strong Confederate force struck the Republic Navy at Mol Calamari. At the same time in the eastern part of the galaxy, even more fleets were on the move. Almost simultaneous attacks occurred in Velmor, Rosh, Naziri, and Kashyyyk. The situation in the south and southeast quadrants wasn't better. A massive Confederacy fleet established a forward supply base at Talang before splitting up and heading to Chara and Lanark. More fleets surged to assault Lanos, Bothoi, Manda, and Rishi. In the south the first part of Operation Dagger, ultimately aimed at Camino, went into effect. Herdessa and Christophus were struck by the leading elements of at least a sector fleet. It was soon confirmed that at least 20 independent battle groups were operating in the region too, scouting and hunting Republic shipping. Another prong of the Confederate offensive launched hours earlier meant to bind the Republic Navy at Naboo. That attack had two obvious aims, to connect separatist territories and prevent any further reinforcement reaching Camino. The Confederacy aimed to achieve that goal by attacking Kalindra, Rundelia and taking control of the hyperlanes in the sector. Those attacks also cut off Malaster and Seaheth. Even more strikes were launched in the south. Their goal was to completely isolate the western quadrant, which would be assaulted the next day. Confederate units moved to secure or reinforce Utapau, Karadef, Rutan, and Brundon. Another fleet took Ulnaha and sunk, facing virtually no resistance. The next day, equal parts of a sector fleet struck Eridau, Aganmar, Atu, Nohan and Bombascauri. With those attacks the Republic territories in the west were cut off and the Separatists began a methodical reduction of the naval elements in the region. They declined to participate in ground campaigns unless a world held critically important resources. While most of the Republic was under heady assault or preparing for one, the eyes of the people in the core worlds were focused closer to home. While the Confederacy's operations outside the core were important, only two of them held high strategic value. First was the obvious attempt to connect their territories across the galaxy, a goal that was achieved within 2 weeks. The second and arguably more critical was the long-anticipated assault of Camino, which was yet to come. The primary goals of the offensive was crippling the Republic's shipbuilding and industry. Over 70% of it was concentrated in the core, and that was where the Confederacy concentrated their efforts. Their assault of the center of galactic civilization began with a heavy attack aimed at a Brigado Ray. A fleet was dispatched to Atresia II. Officially it was there to confirm that Crimson was eradicated, however Oni believed that their true purpose was to ambush General Vale and the containment fleet he took to hunt down Crimson upon their return. The Confederacy advance towards the core began on 3 vectors. First, a sector fleet struck at Kaloda and overwhelmed the defenders. The second prong struck Romamu. Smaller fleet converged on Afar, Chardon, and Tina. Their goal was to connect the Confederate western and central sectors in a third place. The third prong was a controversial one. As expected, another massive fleet Antar. In the same time, Trade Federation units supposedly neutral in the conflict or even backing the Republic broke from their defensive positions at Nemoidia and Cato Nemoidia to attack Adler, thus cutting off Antar, as well as Kamena and Belmora. The net effect of that treason was that Kuwait would be in a striking distance when the fleet from the central sector reduced the Antar's defenses. At the same time, Confederate holdouts in the core like Kola, Castle, Skako and Null attempted a breakthrough, thus tying up Republic forces. For all its ferocity, those attacks were merely a taste of what was yet to come. A Confederate fleet was moving upon Mandalore. Once Kaloda fell, the sector fleet from Fondor was headed straight at Uro, where the Republic Navy had been fortifying its positions. If that world fell, only New Plumpto would stand between them and Corellia. Extract from History of the Clone Wars, Volume 2. Published by Coburn Naval Academy, Coruscant. == SIP Safe House. Location classified. Coruscant. Yoda's mouth tasted like ashes. Those of the Jedi Order, of the Republic and democracy itself. It tasted of his failure as a Grand Master of the Jedi Order. Not what you expected, is it? Dooku wheezed. The Jedi Master stepped away from his shacking former apprentice. Yoda had to confirm what he had been told for himself. No matter that Kota and Windu had scanned Dooku's mind multiple times. It went without saying that none of them took the Sith at his word. However, there were ways to ensure he was telling the truth. The Count had to keep his mind open, without accessing the Force or struggling in any way. Even with his cooperation, it was a delicate and dangerous procedure. One that required complete trust or sheer desperation to undergo, because it was trivial for the one making the scan to shatter the mind they were examining either by mistake or on purpose. It wasn't something undergone lightly. Even when everyone agreed the procedure could be described as a mind rape, a violation of a person's deepest, darkest secrets, their very being. Yoda frowned at his former apprentice. He saw the truth and found it hard to believe. It was even harder to come to terms with what he felt from Dooku. The former Jedi was an impossible contradiction. The Count felt serene, at peace, despite the multiple time he let his mind be violated. Dooku didn't do it because he regretted his actions. Oh, there was regret in the man's heart, but it was about the way he had been played. That he had lost his power. Dooku saw himself as a dead man walking, and all he wanted was vengeance. The only way open to him was to come clean, and he did precisely that. Yoda could see the truth in Dooku's mind. Could feel that those memories were genuine. That made it no less hard to swallow. The Grand Master had been working with the Chancellor ever since Palpatine had been elected. In all that time, he never suspected the man of being a Sith, just another power-hungry politician, if more competent than most. Now that he knew, Yoda could see all the pieces falling into place. The Jedi had been pawns ever since Naboo. The purpose of that invasion was obvious now: ensure Palpatine's election and strike a blow at the Trade Federation, one that in time would drive it to be a part of the Confederacy. How many deceptions were there? How many lies? Palpatine, Vale, Zash. Were those all the Sith? Yoda groaned. Gaga. It was a Sith creation, and it had a battalion sitting in a Jedi temple that had been turned into a death trap, with the consent of the Order no less. With his consent. Foolish I was. Unfit to lead the Jedi I am. Yoda admitted. He looked sadly at Kota and Windu. My fault this is. The Jedi Master sagged in his seat. The offensive began 12 hours ago. Vale is cut off, Windu said. There are only 2 Sith we know of on Coruscant, Kota added. Yoda looked at the crippled man he trained. Sufficient evidence we have not. No. Even if we had something that would be accepted, Palpatine has been in power for a long time. He'll be able to tie us in procedures and other legalities until he can act against us if we try removing him legally. If our evidence is believed in the first place, Windu told his nominal leader. Evidence which we're conspicuously lacking. If it wasn't for the directors knowing what was possible with the Force and believing our explanation, we would be in even worse position, Kota said. They have their own agenda, that much is obvious. Windu pointed out. However, I'm sure they will fight to avoid the Sith turning the Republic into an empire. They believe in democracy. Democracy, you say? Yoda shook his head. Treason we discuss. That's one way to look at it. Removing a traitor who began a war for his own gain is another. Windu shrugged. Dark the future is. The end of the Jedi nears, I fear, Yoda whispered. We're afraid of that. We seek your guidance now that you know the truth, Master Yoda. We can't not act. Kota pleaded. The Sith will destroy us at their convenience if we keep our heads low. If we run, we abandon the Republic and its citizens to a slavery under the Sith. And if we act, the most likely outcome is that we would be hunted by the army even if we succeed. Windu added. Teen and his buddies should have waited. Gathered sufficient support, never gone over your head. Kota shrugged. What is done. We can't change the past. We should learn from our mistakes. Unfortunately, it's simply too late. We should reflect on our past misdeeds if we survive. Now we should make sure there are surviving Jedi to learn from our mistakes. Trap this could be, Yoda muttered. We know. It's one we have to spring. Windu nodded. If we wait, we die for nothing. If we act, we have a chance. Even if we fail, even if the Republic loses, at least we might ensure that the Sith don't win. That will be better for the galaxy than the alternatives. The Seps winning will be better than a Sith ruining everything. Their power will be easier to break than that of an emperor, Kota agreed. For the first time in hundreds of years, Yoda abandoned the speech pattern that he was accustomed to while speaking basic. You want me to lead you in what undoubtedly is going to be the destruction of the Jedi Order. A mighty frown appeared on the ancient Jedi's face. The Order I failed. A quiet, bitter chuckle escaped Yoda's lips while two Jedi and a Sith stared at him as if he had just admitted to be a Sith himself. Old I am. Steeped in my ways I am. Lead you I shall not. Yoda paused and examined the pair of Jedi. Bring to safety the younglings we shall. Abandon Coruscant we will. Stand against the Sith beside you I will. Yoda nodded. He could sense the profound relief Mace and Ram experienced at announcement. May the Force be with us, Yoda whispered and closed his eyes. He knew what his choice meant. The Jedi, his Jedi, were going to pay the price for their hubris. A terrible price. The Republic might not survive the coming storm. It was sickening that he might be the one to destroy a nation he fought to protect for centuries. The alternative was worse. Yoda was old enough to remember the devastation of the Sith Wars. He heard many stories from survivors telling him what hellish existence was to survive under Sith rule. Yoda knew they told him the truth. He saw the scars upon their bodies. He felt those left upon their wounded minds. Yoda simply couldn't step aside and leave the Sith in power, no matter the consequences.